Okay, this time on Captain Castle's laboratory, we are working on Department 56 Fezziwigs Ballroom. Yeah, Fezziwig. For some reason I was going to say Fuzzywig, but no, it's Fezziwig. It's a 120 volt piece. So it's one of these that you don't want to keep it plugged in while you're doing stuff in case your switch fails. Because if your switch fails, you're going to get a lot tingly inside. Alright, so we're going to turn it on. Here's the light. You can hear it. Nobody's moving. And it sounds horrible. It kind of sounds like a cement mixer, but quieter. So I'm going to turn it off and I'm going to unplug it. So not plugged in. Also, real fast, on these older pieces, if it doesn't work and your light bulb doesn't work, you replace it 3 times and it still doesn't work, check the fuse. I had this yesterday where I was at. I was part of a display contest. Here's the fuse. And her lights didn't work. She brought like 3 different bulbs. They didn't work. Well, we're in a display contest. And she blew her fuse. So I just gave her a whole new light harness to make her thing work. So check your fuse. If this doesn't work, so I blew my bulb, you pop a new bulb in, it still doesn't work, what's going on? Fuse. So, that was just a quick side note. And that's only because it happened yesterday. It's part of a multi-thing display. There we go. But that's besides the point. Alright, so this thing is going on 25 years old. It was made in 2000. Not a toy, decorative object. So here's the bottom. This has to come out. Now down these 2 holes there's no screws. They're just holes that are blind. It means they just end. So this whole base has to come off. You can see it's a different color. There's a nice thick glue seam all the way around it. So that's where we're going to start working. I see they didn't put any glue down by the cord, and there's no glue right up here diagonal from it. So first I'm going to do before I get it hot is I'm going to see if there's any flex, because this glue is so old it usually becomes brittle and pops off. So first things first, let's just see if it'll pop with a little pressure. If I can get the screwdriver in. Here we go. And the answer is it is. Yes. It is starting to separate. This whole left side actually came off. The right side doesn't want to though. So I'm going to pop it and shove something underneath it to hold it and work my way around carefully. This is a porcelain house, so just go careful. You can use heat, but just don't warp the plastic. If you do warp the plastic, you can fix it. And there we go. So now let's get rid of the, as they said in the Christmas story, the fragile part. Get it out of the way so we don't damage it. So those 2 standoffs that are blind is because the screws are right there. Now comes the fun part. Here is the replacement motor. You can see it's got the block on the back. This comes from Happy Holidays parts. Right there. And they're out in Florida. We're going to replace this motor. Here's the thing. If you look at this motor, it's threaded, which means it screws on, and you're good to go. So to take it off, you go the other direction. You unscrew it. Here's a problem. The motor's broke, so there's no tension. So it doesn't matter which way I go, it won't unscrew. And this is where the problem lies. This is what a lot of people have issues with that I've talked to. They're like, how do you unscrew something when there's no resistance anymore? Well, that means your motor broke, and you have to get creative. So, first I'm going to do is, this guy in the center pops off. But before I pop him off, I'm going to see if I can hold the shaft with a pair of needle nose pliers. I have these long thin ones. These come from, you can get them like at Michael's or something, Hobby Lobby. They're usually floral. Floral or bead making. So I'm holding the shaft and then I'm unscrewing it, but I have to pull the pliers out, and that's because the bottom of this platform has 3 discs that spin the characters. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here in a second. It is unscrewing, so this is working. Is it enough that it'll spin off by itself? Yeah. There we go. So I was holding this to get this to break free. And the reason I kept pulling these out and putting them back in is because of these. These is what makes the guys, these characters spin in a circle. So now, if you don't have thin needle pliers, these may work too. They're slightly thicker and shorter, as you can see. And the last option, which is, well, there's a couple, but you can try and finagle something in there to take the screws out sideways. So put your screwdriver in at an angle and get the screws out to slide this whole plate free, and then you can position it where you can drop the plate down. You can see there's a gap. You can rotate it and drop it down to get more room. But you have to get these screws out at an angle with this plate on, and that's going to be a pain. You can notch the plate, so you put a little notch in the plate, and then you take the screw out, rotate the plate, take the screw out. Like that's also, I mean, you may not see the notch because you're looking through a window on this house. So again, that's another option. The next option is pop your fiddler here. Is he a fiddler? Yeah, got himself a violin right there. Off, and you can put a small drill bit in here and then put like an easy out or wedge a blade screwdriver, a small one, and then try and spin the disc and hold. So let's say I drilled a small hole and I had a smaller version of this, push this in the hole and then unscrew the disc. Like I said, I didn't want to do anything that could damage this piece, so that's why I wanted to try the needle nose first. It worked. Good. So those are some other options if you encounter one of these that's frozen. It happens a lot, especially on the swinging ghoulies from the Parma 56. That sucker freezes up so fast it's not funny. You can screw it on today, and then tomorrow morning it won't ever come off again. It is something horrible about that one. So just trying to give you options. Oh, those are really tight. Trying to give you options. That probably never come off before. On how to take this apart if yours is frozen, because it happens. Right, so once you get the disc off, no matter how you did it, hopefully without too much destruction, take out the 2 screws, slide the plate off, and then wiggle your motor out. It's going to be somewhat stuck because it's probably been in here for a quarter of a century. And those screws are so tight it kind of flare the tops a little bit. Alright, so we'll pop that one out. So, and that one. That. Now, I don't know if they soldered them or if there's what they call a female spade connector. That's what those are on here. So I'm just going to slice off the heat shrink because I think they soldered it. Yeah, they did. So these are soldered on. So if you do not have a soldering iron, you can use a spade connector. You need the female ones. I would recommend the color blue. That the coloring is the size. And you can just spade connect them on. But they did some massive solder joints for safety. Solder is safer than a butt connector. So, I'm not going to even attempt to desolder those, mainly because the amount of heat it's going to take is insane. You have to heat up everything to get the solder to melt because everything acts as a heat sink. It'll just dissipate the heat of the soldering pen. I'd have to pull out my soldering gun, and I would it's just easier if I trim off a couple of inches, excuse me, a couple of millimeters of insulation. I'm going to shorten this thing by 1/8 of an inch. So, not going to make a big deal. Or it's not going to be a big deal. So here's our trash motor. I can rotate this. You shouldn't be able to move it. So this one's garbage. It's been leaking oil. One, there's oil on the flange here, and then there's oil right there. So it's technically grease. Let me correct myself. It gets hot and turns into an oil because it gets hot from use, and well, we live in Arizona. This might have been stored outside. It's also leaking around the bearing right here. So this motor is garbage. Just so you know, this motor, the original, is a 110, 120 volt, 50, 60 hertz, 4 watt, 5-6 RPM counterclockwise rotation, or CCW. The replacement motor is 110, 120, 5-6 RPM, 50, 60 hertz AC motor, counterclockwise rotation of 4 watt. So even though it looks different, you can see that the tail's longer, and it's the same thickness, and it's the same diameter. It's basically the exact same motor. Now, because this is a ballroom and it spins in a circle, if the replacement says CW, it's not going to make a difference. So instead of rotating left, it's going to rotate right. The characters are spinning anyways. It doesn't matter. Just so you're aware. They have the tabs bended down. I'll probably bend the tabs down after I screw it on. I'm going to screw it on just to hold it in place for me so I'm not fidgeting around with it. The heat that it produces is going to be only on this end. It's not going to hurt the plastic any. And because of how tight these are, I'm going to actually just use a hand screwdriver. Now, because this is a 120 volt piece, I would highly recommend putting the heat shrink back on. Highly recommend. If you don't have heat shrink available and you don't have electrical tape available, smother it in hot glue. Reason being is they don't want this thing to be running on your counter and then you lift it up and this plate falls out because the glue deteriorated, and you go and grab it and you touch those two prongs with these two wires because again, it's 120 volts. It's going to hurt a lot. So, highly recommend that you protect the ends with something in case something happens. That way you are protected from getting electrocuted or electric shocked. Likelihood of electrocution is pretty slim, but it still hurts. I have been shocked more times than I care to remember, from powers ranging from a few volts all the way up to 700,000. And I'm not talking about a stun gun. So, yeah, it's painful. And technically I've been electrocuted because it did kill me. I had to get jump started back. So, be very careful. I mean, very careful. Somebody who's been there, don't tempt it. When I train people on my job, I make sure they keep their hands clear of the stuff that we do, because we work with powers ranging from 5 volts all the way up to 250 volts, and ranging in amperage from negligible to 100 amps. So it's the amperage that kills you, not the voltage. Just like that. Alright, so to help with conductivity of the heat transfer, and the solder's ability to solder or weld the wires together, I added flux. Technically that's copper, that's probably a nickel tin, and it should be okay. I'm going to pre-tin it or pre-flux it anyway before I tin the wire, because it's thick wire. I need to make sure that the solder penetrates all the strands. This one. Where aren't you? There we go. So the easiest way I can describe this is you get the wire so hot that the solder gets sucked into it. It's kind of like soaking into a sponge. So the solder is trying to weave its way through all the different strands of copper, and it kind of looks like a sponge when you're doing it. You can see it slowly moving throughout the strands. It's like watching water fill up a sponge. Anyhow, so everything's pre-tinned. Now I just got to melt all the solder so I can get these things to stick. This works so much better with a soldering gun than a soldering pen. But I do have my pen at a higher temperature. It just takes a little bit longer than a gun. There's one. There's two. Got those wires hot. I started shrinking my heat shrink. Hopefully it'll slide over. Alrighty. Yeah, you have to get it really hot to do this. It's a lot of mass. It should be cool enough. Yep, to slide the heat shrink on. Heat shrinks on, and let's get use a lighter to shrink it. There we go. Since they had it bent down because there's the hole, I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers to bend the tabs carefully so I don't crack anything, like cracking the solder or cracking the plastic housing. So I'm actually twisting the pliers, not bending it across the plastic. So instead of just folding it, I'm twisting. So that's causing the metal to bend outside of the plastic housing. Because what's stronger, metal or plastic? Those wires gotta go right there. Now, let's see if it works. So, I'm not going to fully assemble it. What I want to do is, because I have to put that plastic plate back on too, I'm going to just screw this on so we can make sure it turns. And that's why I know I don't have a defective motor. Now I can see the motor turn without these characters, but I don't know if you will be able to. It's crooked, but that's okay. I just want it on enough that you can see it. There you go. So I will leave the info below of the motor from Suntronics, or Happy Holidays parts. That's with an S after holidays and an S after parts. probably thinking, oh, see, if you would have just done this the first time. Like I said, I was just using it as a support. It was basically just a jig to hold it, so that way I could work on it and not be all fidgety, and that way you could see how it was being done on camera. When you do this at home, you don't have to screw it to the housing like I did. You can hold it in your hand or just set it on your table or bench or workspace and you'll be fine. Again, it was just to make it easier for the camera. Make sure they're snug, but not so snug that you break the plastic. That would be bad. Make sure it looks right too. This doesn't look right. It's shifted. It's not sitting flush. That's better. And then we just reverse the process. So these are left-handed threads. So that means we got to screw it on backwards. So in this case, it's lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. Does not want to. There we go. They just didn't want to go in. It's a really tight fit. I'm wondering if this might be like a 64th or a thousandth of an inch bigger than the original. It's just really tight compared to the original. But that's okay. It means it won't unscrew itself. Just go to where it stops. Do not torque it. So I'm just going to where it stops and then back it up a little bit. That helps with it freezing into place. Now we just need to get the characters to drop their little spinny parts inside of the plastic housing. There we go. And let's test it with the thing actually assembled properly. Power. There we go. If you don't have this piece, apparently it's supposed to have spots where it doesn't do anything, because there's literally spots in the plastic where it doesn't do anything. So, all right, now bring back the fragile part. Need to get the old glue off, which there's a lot of it. So basically the last part is to clean up the glue and glue it back in. So, and then we'll test it. The glue has white paint on it. It's not chipping. The white pieces you see is not the white from the ceramic. That's the actual paint that they painted the glue. do that on a couple of pieces where they paint the the glue white. I think Department 56 is the only one I've ever seen do that. Most companies never paint their glue. But hey, if it makes them happy. I'm going to hot glue it in. They used a resin glue or a hard glue. I'm going to hot glue it so it can be worked on again in the future easier. The only reason this resin glue came out as easy as it did because it's the original and it's going on to a quarter-century old. If this was fresh glue, Gorilla, Super, whatever brand you prefer, and it was glued in and it broke in, let's say, 2 years, you ain't getting it out. Not easily. So hot glue at least allows you to get it warm and it'll start to separate. I think I got enough of it clear that she'll sit good. Let's take a look. Excuse me. Shifted. The wire got caught, like I said. It's got to go in that little notch. If it doesn't stay in that notch, it gets caught. And because this new motor is slightly longer, it's a little bit harder. Come on. Stop getting caught. There we go. And center. Center. Cool. If you don't talk to your pieces, you're doing it wrong. Put the light bulb in it since we're going to do a lower light test. Now it's just waiting for the hot glue to get hot. Alright, so I will link below the link to Suntronics for the motor. The motor, I think, goes for about $40, $45 a piece. They're not cheap, but it's cheaper than trying to replace your unit. It's not too terribly difficult to replace, as you saw. You just got to get the seal around this to separate, and then pull it out straight, and then unscrew your people, which you'll have to unscrew, probably with a pair of needle-nose pliers. Pull it out a little bit since I'm starting to drip glue. We're nice and warm, so I can get in here and glue. Might be time to buy another cheap glue gun. This thing's getting, the trigger's wearing out. It's stretching. Sure, there's nothing on the front that's breakable. Well, it's all breakable, but no small pieces will snap off from leaning it. Little screwdriver. Well, if you turn the light at an angle, both cords fit easier. I'm sure those who own this piece know that, but yeah, the trigger doesn't grab as good as it used to. So you gotta squeeze really hard. This is a $15 glue gun from Amazon, and then 3D printed the file to adapt it to use the wall batteries, because the batteries for this thing are stupid expensive, and it doesn't come with them. I'll put a seal around the edge. There we go. Right there. But I've been using it for years, and the trigger is wearing out. It's stretching. The pin, it's all plastic. The plastic pin's warping from the heat that it pivots on. I opened it once to see if I could fix it. All right, let's kill some lights. Go. Characters are spinning. I just tipped it so I could see for a second. Making sure that they're all doing their little spins. So there you go. You could do it in less than 30 minutes if you did it at home, most likely. So basically, if it doesn't spin, your motor's bad. There's no gears, no belts, no nothing. It's just a direct drive motor, and then your light is a light bulb. So if both don't work, and you change the light bulb like 2 or 3 times, most likely you blew the fuse. Now, it's a 5 amp fuse. You can get them on Amazon specifically for the Department 56. They come in like a pack of 5 or 6, and if it blows the fuse again, you have a bad motor. Short it out. That is the only reason this is fused. It is not fused for any other reason than the motor. So if the motor shorts out, it doesn't fry your wall socket and potentially cause a fire. So this fuse, if it keeps blowing, means your motor's on its way, or you have a short. So they crimp these wires up inside here, and I've seen it once where internally they started touching and arcing and blowing internally, so it was a bad socket. Normally you can tell because the socket will be discolored, cracked, and if you look inside, usually it'll be blackened. But it's a fuse because of the motor. So if you're blowing the fuse constantly, motor, they don't spin, motor, or the plastic broke on the shaft and the shaft spinning and the disc isn't anymore. But there you go. That's how you change the motor in the Fezziwig Ballroom, which apparently is warehouse number 2 on 48 Fleet Street. So, if you haven't seen the piece, I'll just give you a quick spin around. Here's the back. Of course, you already saw the top. And then on the bottom, you got to make sure your grooves, so if your light bulb's at an angle, both cords will fit in the groove perfectly. So, there you go. And apparently this is from the Dickens Village series. So there you go. So that concludes this one. Until the next one, thanks for watching.